Awesome. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining this live stream on my YouTube channel. This live stream was supposed to be with Rona from Commodore, who's working as open source engineer at Commodore. Now, she is sick and can sadly not join this live stream today, and we can't talk about Kubernetes deployment strategies like we've originally planned as part of my live stream series, She Can Cloud Native. However, we're going to reschedule that one. But since already people signed up for this live stream, I thought I'm still going to have a live stream. So thank you for joining. If you are watching live, maybe say hi in the chat. So I know people are in the chat and the chat actually works. That would be amazing. Now, I've decided to instead just have an informal live Q&A. So if you have any questions, anything you want to ask, then do post it in the chat or in the comment section. Otherwise, I'm going to talk about tech influencers and women in tech events and initiatives because I have a lot of thoughts on that, and I thought, why not? I might as well just talk about it live. If I say anything that I regret later, you might be the only one who hear me say it, and then I will just maybe take down this live stream so nobody remembers and you don't have any proof of me saying it. So that's why live streams are great, but I guess it's still online. So maybe I shouldn't share those thoughts. But anyway, so I have some controversial thoughts on those topics. I guess they are somewhat controversial. But yeah, hey, thank you for joining. Alistair, like always, thank you. And I don't know how to pronounce your name. Yosef, thank you for joining. Welcome. So it's funny, actually, because as soon as I posted this, the signups, the waiting list for this live stream went up. So you are obviously more interested in me sharing controversial thoughts than Kubernetes deployment strategy. So I should find people in the space who have really controversial thoughts and just have runs about really controversial things. Maybe they're not that controversial. We'll see. We'll find out. So first thing is tech influencers. So the tech influencer topic, let's dive right into it, right? Started with Divya Mohan, who was in my previous live stream last week. We had an amazing live stream on WebAssembly, and she gave an amazing presentation. So thank you so much. Huge shout out to Divya. Now, Divya also posted on her blog, just I think a few weeks ago, maybe 2 months ago, the DevRel influencer trend. And that got lots and lots of traction on Twitter, on social media. Has anybody here read this post? Share it in a comment if you have read this post. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Oh, from Texas, somebody's joining. Hi, Jeff. Welcome. Nikhil, thank you for joining. Hi there. So here, the DevRel influencer trend. So basically, it's about that my interpretation, short form, and I've read it a while ago, so that's kind of like what I remember, is basically that you have people who are in developer relations. And developer relations is really like a broad term that describes community, developer advocacy, developer relations engineering is like a specific term for people who are really focused on like the usability engineering part of providing integrations and programming those and things like that. So you have several different kind of job titles. You also have, I guess, content marketing within developer relations a lot of times. So it's really like you can't say that the same job title will be the same across different companies. It will always be very different. So that's really a broad term. But that's like an established field that exists since at least a decade, right? In various formats. And especially developer advocacy has taken off quite a bit within the cloud native space. Let me just zoom in on this so you can see it better. Now, then you have, in addition to that, you have social media influencers. And you might call me a social media influencer for providing tutorials on YouTube, right? On different topics that I like. And I'm influencing, I guess, those topics in some form of way. The thing is that there are lots of, obviously, influencers who have maybe come from a certain field within tech space, maybe web front-end programming, have built lots of social media traction, and then transition from there, from this influencer perspective, into the DevRel part. And that has several different effects onto the DevRel side of things, right? Because as a DevRel, like I should not be paid for like my developer advocacy job, as like my work. I'm not getting, like, it's not part of my I guess, let's say, performance on how many views I get, on how many people I have on social media following me and viewing my content. That's not a metrics for DevRel per se. A metrics for DevRel would be number of webinar signups, number of the conversion from certain videos, I guess, like the click-through rate. But it's ultimately for DevRel, it's really more like a long-term trend that you are into, like that you basically want to achieve. So for example, if I do this year lots of conference speaking in certain areas, I expect then the next half a year, I expect a return from those conference speaking, right? That would be kind of like a long-term metrics that I'm tracking of, for example, right? Just as giving an example, but there are really different areas that you would track as a within DevRel that are more qualitative driven. So for example, the number of questions you answer within the community with content, right? Or the number of views on your blog and the click-through rate on the links on the blog. That would be like a better metric for DevRel versus social media influencer would be, for example, number of views of a video, right? My videos don't get that many views. So the problem here is, and I'm going to look at the chat in a second, the problem here is that lots of social media influencers, they are providing certain services, let's say for example, businesses in the cloud native space, and present themselves as very knowledgeable, while they might just, for example, learn about the topic on the go for a specific video. They will maybe give certain recommendations based on what they get paid to give recommendations on, and similarly, right? You wouldn't expect it for somebody who's working in DevRel, right? As a DevRel, you represent your company usually. You don't represent multiple companies for commercial reasons. I represent, for example, Aqua Security because I believe in what Aqua Security does, their work, and so on, right? So I'm presenting them as developer advocate, and I'm identifying as part of the brand, right? Which is quite different from being paid one-off, which social media influencers are often are. Now, there are lots of different. Divya has done an amazing job kind of providing that information and giving her perspective. I'm going to look at the chat. So, comment by Matt. I have seen several companies pay for influencers to cover or recommend their software, spending lots of money for it, but often the audience does not match the product. That's actually a huge issue that you see that lots of companies run into, because ultimately they want to satisfy metrics for investors, right? They want to be able to show, for example, on their open source project, the number of GitHub stars went up, right? So they get social media influencers to pay, or like they pay them to get their followers and so on to click on the star button on GitHub, and then they use that as a metrics. But the thing is, that's really diluting the metrics of like how many stars do you have on GitHub, because ultimately, if those are not your users who give you a star, then it's very counterintuitive to use that as a metric, right? For example, for us at Aqua Security, the star count on our different projects matter because they are representing our users. We're not paying anybody to send their followers to give that a star. We are saying, for example, I'm saying on the Aqua YouTube account, I am saying, if you like our project, give us a star on GitHub. It would mean a lot to us. That is a form of, yes, I'm trying to get an action out of people who are viewing the project. But I know if you are watching to the end of one of those videos, you are already within a category of user that we want, and that we want to see kind of engagement from, and that we want to know that you exist. Because ultimately, if we know that you like this project from us, this open source project, more than this other open source project from us, this project has more stars than the other one, then we know where to focus our efforts on in the open source team and within our contributor space and so on, right? So that's like the different kinds of metrics. What else do we have here? Sorry, I have a cold as well, so you might hear me doing that sound. I don't know how to call it in English. I'm just looking through it. Oh, a list of things. So it's the company's fault for not targeting to correct audiences. Well, it's kind of short-term gain, right? But in long term, the company will have problems. Like I have seen Slack communities who got so diluted by, I guess, the audience that project didn't really want to, that the quality, like people who are actually using the project don't want to join that Slack community anymore, for example, right? So there are lots of cases where it's just, it doesn't represent the community. And then the project, obviously, once they are within a space. So for example, let's give you like a different example. As you watching my tutorials here on my YouTube channel, you're not the kind of audience that I would sell a mug to, right? And I need to drink. So, like if I would have a branded mug, right? You're not necessarily the type of audience who would buy my branded mug, because I didn't create this channel on that basis, right? So for me then to go from trying to basically from trying to get one type of content to selling you something else, it's quite difficult to revert to that other space, right? They're like case studies. I don't know if they're called case studies, but there's some social media influencers, or like on Instagram and so on, who have built, for example, huge following based on their lifestyle, based on their brand. But their brand is not the kind of brand where you sell something to your followers. So they maybe, once they started a product, they've maybe sold like a handful of items to their million of followers, because those are not the kind of followers who would buy that product, right? So, and that's similar in the cloud native space. If the project is paying just to get clicks, for example, on their GitHub stars, or just to get views on certain videos, that's just a number that doesn't convert into anything. And I think more and more projects who have done that throughout the past 2 years, as like the trend of social media influencers started, have realized that that's an issue. Now, I can share this in the comment section, and you can read it if you want to, Divya's post. But that's, yeah, so that's basically the reason that's an issue, is because now that there are so many like social media influencers, tech influencers, also developer relations people get measured from that angle, right? So here, why is it worrisome? Well, because ultimately I'm like, so, or other DevRel people get measured by kind of the returns they, or like the number of views and other metrics that don't really count, because it's so difficult to ultimately measure developer relations. So lots of companies use, for example, views on a video as a metrics, right? Which is not a very good metrics. Also, the other thing is, somebody mentioned in a comment as well, that people get lots of money, right? Like there's some social media influencers, some tech influencers who get like, they get 50K plus for one sponsored video that's like 10 minutes or something, right? Like that's not unheard of. That's like something, especially like in niche spaces, niche areas where there are not many tech influencers, then people obviously, like, companies pay more to get that kind of sponsorship. But again, this is sponsorship. And the other thing is that as somebody, and I kind of pointed out here in this tweet, as somebody who's working for one company and representing one company, it's difficult to keep up with that, because ultimately you, on one hand, you are kind of losing out on the money by keeping your reputation as like not being a certain type of DevRel person. But on the other hand, you don't want to get into that space, but you want to be adequately, I guess, compensated for your skills, because developer advocacy, developer relations, you have to bring so many different skills to that company. And then there are, like, on the other hand, tech influencers who've built their following in some form or another, and then provide certain recommendations for paid sponsorship in return of paid sponsorship to the community, and you're kind of swimming against that trend, right? Yeah, so there are lots of people who give kind of opinions, I guess, thoughts that are not really like backed up. Oh my god, the chat is like, there's so much going on. Let me catch up with that. there's nothing wrong with paying for leads. It's just it has to be qualitative leads, right? Like leads is different from views. Leads is, for example, if you have a webinar and people sign up to that webinar, and then you have information of the people who joined, and those are then leads that the sales representatives can follow up on, right? Versus views is, for me, is something that's very like, it's an undefinable, like no, how do you say that in English? It's a number that you can't define. You can't define who's watching, right? Like the people who are watching this live stream are not necessarily the people who will want to hear me talk about security scanning. Those are different audiences, right? And so it doesn't really make much sense if I now send you to the Trivy GitHub repository to give it a star. It has nothing to do with one or the other, right? Yeah, but it's a short-term gain, right? Like a company says short-term, for example, to get into the CNCF or into other organizations, we have so and so many stars on GitHub. But what does that actually translate to? What does that matter, right? So it's, one hand, it's the company's fault for not targeting the right audiences, but it has a wider impact on the community, that there are projects being promoted that are not necessarily backed by the community as the numbers show, right? And that's kind of the issue. Oh, hi, Kuna. Thank you for joining. Oh, there's this long conversation between Matt and Alistair. I'm just catching up on that. Yeah, clicks are good for future funding rounds. Well, depends. Yeah. Yeah, so there are lots of tech influencers, right, who are using their following to make money in a different space, right? There are I've seen lots of people talk about, or like something that has been criticized, especially developer advocates in the past, that we are just applying for conference with topic that we prepare just for that conference. So basically, that's kind of, and that's coming from the social media influencer trend. So social media influencers are not the type of people who are within a specific space, stay within a specific space, and only talk about kind of that specific space, right? Because to a tech influencer, you have to keep being interesting on different topics, right? You want to appeal to a wide range of different people, of different audiences. You can't do that if you focus on specific topic, right? For example, my YouTube channel here focuses on other topics, not necessarily just related to cloud native security. So I can appeal to a wider audience than, for example, on the Aqua open source YouTube channel, where it's really focused on security scanning, where it's this niche part, right, that probably not that many people are interested in. But social media influencers will try to appeal to this wide audience, and then prepare on specific topics just to do, for example, a video on them, right? No, I'm not saying I have not done it in the past, to prepare on a content piece just to do a YouTube video on it. But I guess the difference is kind of the disclaimer that you offer. Like, from which angle do you approach the topic? Is it you're learning about it and you're sharing your learnings in public, which many developer relations, developer advocates, and similar in the space do? For example, there's 90 Days of DevOps, which somebody did in the space, where they shared, of course, 90 days publicly online, their DevOps learning journey, and they show different projects and different tools and so on. That's not tech influencing, that's developer relations, right? Where they learn about something, where they share their learnings on an ongoing basis on a specific topic, which is quite different. So there are DevRel who have been, or like, there has been a kind of an accusation of developer advocacy, of DevRel, that you're just preparing on a topic just to then give a presentation on it. And that's problematic, because then you don't want to fall into that kind of space, because then ultimately, if I'm just preparing on a topic to give a talk on it, then I don't really know about that topic, do I? What else? I think I've done my rant about it now. So if you just joined and you want to watch my rant about DevRel or versus social media influencer, then do play this recording of this live stream. So that's that part. Just going through the comments. Start a writing blog. If you want input on your content, you can share that in the specific communities. So for example, if you did a blog post on platform engineering, you can share it in the platform engineering Slack. And I'm sure there are people who are excited to give you feedback on your content. Now, there were other questions and thoughts on like if it's possible to how you can make a career in the cloud space, cloud DevOps space. That really depends on your background skills. It's, I guess, just about learning about fundamentals that are required in the cloud engineering space, such as how do you operate a Linux machine, how you like sysadmin skills, kind of, and some other. I don't know. I wasn't prepared for that question. Some other skills that you can get started on, and then you can look for junior positions in the cloud space. Now, due to the, I guess, current market situation, there are obviously not many junior positions, I guess. I got started in the cloud native space through a junior position. So I was working as developer advocate in the cryptocurrency blockchain space for several years, and then I wanted to change industry, and I was contacted by somebody who was looking for a junior developer advocate for a cloud native company, and that's how I got into the cloud native space. It was really by chance through a junior position. Just answering some of the questions in between. Before we have my second rant of the day, I like this. This is actually fun. There's one more question in between, and then the next round happens. So you are asking if you, after having done infrastructure engineering related tasks, and you want to switch into DevOps, you want to become more, I guess, get more into that space and become more hands-on. How can you do that? I would start getting involved using projects, for example, in the CNCF space, in the CNCF ecosystem, other open source projects. Open source projects can give you lots of experience with different tools, with different projects, with different platforms that you can either build upon. For example, you can, if you're using a certain project, and you would like to use it with another project, you can build an integration that shows experience, and that's kind of how you can expand your skills. Now, within DevOps specifically, I guess it's really about learning about DevOps practices and then applying them to your own projects, and then you can from there expand and make that your day job. I guess that's how I would approach it. That's just my 2 cents. So second rant of the day is on here. Ooh, how do we do this? Here, on Women in Tech Events and Initiatives. So last week, at the 8th of March, was International Women's Day. And like every year, that's the week or the day where companies go full in and show off their women, female identifying employees. And that is very, very frustrating, being a woman in the tech space. For multiple reasons, right? So first of all, you don't want to be shown off as like this trophy, this 1 in a million kind of thing once in a year, right? That shouldn't be the point. It's not the point of International Women's Day. Yes, the point of International Women's Day is to celebrate achievements of women in the space. But if that's done just once a year, it doesn't really have much of an impact, and it doesn't have long-lasting effects. And there are multiple different initiatives that actually companies think are okay and think they are contributing to more diversity while they are not. And that includes, for example, hosting events for women in the space. There are so many events for women in the space, right, that I can get involved in throughout the year if I wish to. I don't need International Women's Day for companies to host specific events. That's one thing. Then the other thing is that because it's just this one-time I guess, one-time event that's largely targeted towards women, the rest of the tech community doesn't really learn about how to support women in the space. And I wrote this blog post, let me just find it, on how men can support women in tech. Let me just pull it up. Where did I put it? I'm scrolling through my Twitter. That's how organized I am. Where is it? Here. So, okay, you see me, big face. So, let's scroll down. So, how men can and should support women in tech. So, I wrote this blog post because I think that we actually need men to host events for women and to get involved with women-focused career events. How should I call that? Because it doesn't make any sense for me, it doesn't make any sense to go to a networking event where just women are. Like, yes, it's nice to be sometimes in an environment, in a more inclusive environment where I feel, I guess, safer to express myself, to express my thoughts, to have people who relate to me. Yes, that's all amazing because it makes me feel less alone and it makes me feel more supported in certain ways. However, to advance my career, I ultimately need the men in the tech space to help me advance my career. Like, throughout my short career, I guess, they have only, like, all of my mentors have been men. And that was the case just because I reached out to people directly and was like, hey, can you please help me with XYZ? Now, that's a really direct approach, and it's an approach that shouldn't necessarily be done. It's much better to go through more official, I guess, networking and mentoring programs. But also those mentoring programs, it's largely focused either like it's an all-in-one mentoring program, and then you don't have women being supported as a focus group, or you have all women mentoring programs. Last year, I was a mentor at an all women mentoring program, and it wasn't that, I guess, effective because ultimately I wasn't working in the same space as the women that I was mentoring. So I could only support them to some extent, right? Versus in the, I guess, for example, in the SRE infrastructure space, the majority of people are men. It's a heavily male-dominated area. Anything security, sysadmin related, that's heavily male dominated. So ultimately, if you want to support more women in the space, you need the men to support the women because there's not enough women who have, who are in senior positions who can support the more junior people and bring more diversity in. So I talk in this blog post basically about how different approaches you can take. And now I'm going to read the comments and maybe regret it. Here's a question. I'm curious. I have been talking to a lot of folks for series on event strategies. One of the things I hear over and over again is the desire for more diversity, but not sure how to. Something that a conference did very well, and I'm going to share that in a second as well. Here, this conference. Let me give you a case study of a conference that did it so well. Here, what the fuck is SRE? Okay, this has been happening for 2 years in a row, 2021, 2022, virtual. Now they are doing it for the first time in person in London. They didn't have a CFP open because they decided, I think they didn't have a CFP open. Maybe it was open, but not really, not really promoted, because they wanted to have a diverse speakers participating, right? So what they did is they reached out to me directly and asked me, hey, do you want to speak? Right. So obviously they know that I like to speak at conferences in the space, and I was always saying, hey, of course I would like to speak, right? But then they went a step further, and they asked me, do you know anybody who identifies as being a woman in the space who we could ask to get involved? And I didn't really know anybody I could ask. But what they then did is, because I didn't have the time to put the effort in to look for people and for them that they could reach out to, they sent me a list of 5 people and they asked me, do you know any of these 5 women whom you can connect us with? Because obviously being connected with somebody is better than cold outreach, right? So I connected them with 3 different women in the space so they can then invite those women to speak at the conference, right? So they went the extra mile of getting a more inclusive, more diverse speaker lineup by proactively reaching out to people, looking for people in the space. If you're a man in the space, you must at least know one woman whom you would recommend to a conference that in the space that you're working at. Like, if you don't know one woman at the space, then please do work on getting your network up to speed. I think that's really about men having the right network as well, and proactively like getting up I guess a more diverse network. Like, for example, if you would have asked me when I got started in the cloud native space 2 years ago, I wouldn't really know. I wouldn't really talk to on a daily basis to any woman in the space. I wouldn't, right? And so if you would have asked me, hey, which women would you recommend? I wouldn't really know because I wasn't actively networking with women in the space. And I think that's what happens to a lot of men, that you are ultimately you're networking, but you're not networking with a diverse audience basis, right? And that obviously translates into events, into different initiatives being male driven, because men in the space are not actively networking with a diverse group of people. And I think that's where it starts, really, like companies encouraging their employees, I guess, to network with a diverse audience. And then it trickles down to different initiatives. So it really starts, I think, with the individual. However, I have seen a conference that was, I'm not going to name any names, that was held on International Women's Day that had an all-male lineup, right? I don't get it. I just don't get it how you can, like anything all-male, how you can say yes to that, right? There are so many women in the space who also don't have maybe the opportunities. Like now I'm literally being given lots of these speaker opportunities or other things, just because I'm visible at this point in the space. But there are so many amazing women who do the heavy work behind the scenes, who are not being given, I guess, the same kind of opportunities, but they should be. Like, the trophies should go to those women versus the people who are actually being visible in the space. Okay, now I'm going to check out the comments. I'm reading up. Matt, you're very active. I appreciate it. I'm just reading through it. Continuing my thought, especially. Okay, so Matt is saying there are already communities that are heavily skewed towards a certain gender. So meaning there are certain communities that are already kind of in the, I guess, more one-sided kind of domain, kind of space, maybe gender-wise, maybe diversity-wise. How can you help those communities? That's a great question. Obviously, it's easier to kind of encourage diversity from the get-go, from the start. Then once you have already started a community and expanded, and then you realize, oh, that community is heavily, for example, heavily male-dominated, what do you do next, right? For example, let's take the Agfa open source community, right? I frequently see women who are getting involved, but they're just less vocal within our community. So how can we support them, for example, to be more vocal? They are definitely there. There are definitely many women who are users of our open source projects, and I see them every once in a while posting, asking questions, asking for feedback on how to optimize their setup with our tools. But obviously, it's like the industry itself. It's more male-dominated, the conversations and so on. I think the first thing is really to provide the right setup. So I don't, for example, I wouldn't necessarily get involved in a community that doesn't have a code of conduct, right? So if you can set up these kind of structures before that makes a huge difference. Let me share somebody else's content. What's her name? Sa here, who does amazing work in this space regarding community building, is Leanne. Now, Leanne is actually talking at, where is it? I'm going to scroll for it. Here, at the Open Source Summit. She's going to talk about how to build sustainable communities. I think that's the topic, summarizing it. I can't find the title right now. But basically, listening to folks like Leanne, who has done the work, who has the experience, who has come from an engineering perspective, and then started to build communities, can give you lots of input on how you can make communities more inclusive and more welcoming. So basically, it doesn't matter if a community is already all male dominated. That's fine. It's about how people talk to each other, right? So, for example, if I see somebody post on the Aqua Slack community, "Hey guys," or something that's more one-sided in terms of language, I'm going to step in as a moderator and I'm going to ask them to use more inclusive language, right? And these small actions then can have a long-term trickle-down effect, I guess. So I would really recommend, like, there are people who have had the experiences to build communities, and they have extensive knowledge on those topics, and I would really look out for them and what kind of learnings they have to share. I think that's better than me giving my my low cost advice. Oh, okay. That's an interesting comment. Thank you for sharing that, Ivan. So, Ivan shared, well, last time I tried that personal invites, I was accused of sexual harassment. So, there's obviously, that's why we see lots of men at conferences not even saying hi to women, right? Like, if I'm sitting next to somebody at a conference in the audience, some men wouldn't even say hi to me, engage in a conversation, either because they don't know what I can talk about. Apparently, that's something I heard as a reason, which is valid. I'm not devaluing that comment, or because they don't want to be accused of coming across in the wrong way, right? And that's why you have lots of men not getting involved, not wanting to accidentally trip over that line of, like, okay, what is socially acceptable, or what goes into sexual harassment, for example, or any form of other abuse, right? Now, it's a lot of times, it's really how you express it. But I mean, sending out an invite to somebody, it's really like, I don't know how much can go wrong for that. Like, if you're hosting an event, for example, in London, let's say, "Hey, we are hosting a meetup on topic XYZ. Here's the meetup link. We would love if you want to attend, or like share with people," or I don't know, or ask, for example, let me share that, community women in cloud native. So let me share that here. There's this community called Women in Cloud Native, and if you want to invite, for example, more women to your event, reach out to, for example, the organizers here of this. That's like one strategy, right? So reach out to the organizers and be like, "Hey, I would like to have more diverse people attend our event," to reach out, to bring that more, or like to spread the word across to more people, to different people. Could you please share that in your community? So rather than you joining the Discord as a man, which is not necessarily nicely seen in a safe all women space, right? Reach out to the organizers, say like, "Hey, I would like to invite more people. Could you please reach out to them?" That would be one strategy where you can kind of, I guess, take yourself out of the equation of like reaching out to people directly. Because if a man sends me a direct message, probably 95% of the time, I will not respond. I guess that is very valid. That is a very valid comment. So there is obviously, you have to be a little bit more careful, I guess, how you approach it. And that's why I said earlier as well that as a woman in space, official mentoring programs are always better. The problem is that official mentoring programs usually focus on all women mentee-mentor relationships, versus me having somebody who's more senior in the space mentor me in a formal way, right? Which I would rather have, because it can get me further than if I have somebody, a more senior woman from a different tech industry, because there's so many different industry in tech as well, right? Mentor me. That wouldn't make much sense to me. Anyway, but it's a very valid comment. And again, there's a thin line really for that. Let me go through the other comments. There's another comment, also by Ivan. We have about 10% women. I really don't want to pay an extra attention to the participants' gender. I think it has to be done before, right? Like once you already know that there are 10% women participating, you can take that as a metrics for the next midterm program and be like, okay, let's aim for a higher percentage. How do we aim for a higher percentage, right? But during the program, it shouldn't matter, I think, what somebody's gender is, right? So for example, right now I guess, how do you say it? For example, I'm organizing DevOps Days Birmingham with 4 men. 4 men. Yeah, 4 men. I'm the only woman who's on the organizing team, right? And that's okay for now, right? We don't pay attention for it for now. That's done for now. But next year, the next I guess co-organizer that we onboard, that should be ideally a woman, or somebody with who's not identifying as a man, right? That should be the idea. But during the process of organizing it, it shouldn't make much of a difference. You don't want to be also the person, right? You don't want to be the person who's constantly being called out or who constantly has to call out things, right? For example, if I'm the only diverse, non-male identifying person within any sort of team, I don't want to have to call things out as being not inclusive. I don't want to be the one who has to enforce things, right? I want other people to do that for me because it's just so much extra work that you have to put in to call things out or to change things. So while something is happening, there's very little point, I guess, in having to be that person. But from an organizing perspective, it should always be kind of a focus. What else? Okay, there are lots of comments and I don't know which comment they relate to, so I'm not gonna address them individually. Oh, yeah, Alistair is saying that he enjoys walking into a room going, all men? Wow. It makes people who probably were not thinking about it take a look around. And that's great, right? You don't want to be that person as the only woman in that room. You don't want to be the person who's like going, why no. Oh, that sounds like disgusted. No, but like who's going into a room and being like, why am I the only person who looks like me in that room? It makes you feel odd. Yeah, and it's ultimately not providing that kind of safe environment. And I'm saying safe environment for both genders because also as a man, you wouldn't want to go to an all-women event, right? You wouldn't want to do that. And that's kind of the issue as well, right? That then obviously as a woman in a space, you can't safely network, which is discouraging lots of opportunities. Whereas if there's more diversity within, for example, a group discussion, it's easier to exchange ideas and to get thoughts and input on the work that you're doing. Are there any other comments? I think that's it. Awesome. Well, thank you for listening to my little rants. I would love to hear more of your thoughts. But I think this is all the thoughts that I wanted to share personally today. Let me know if you want to have more of these kind of live streams. I just thought it's fun to have a live stream since this was already scheduled. And sadly, Rona couldn't make the She Can Cloud Native live stream series. Now, the live stream series, again, it's called She Can Cloud Native because I'm only inviting people who don't identify as men to that live stream series. Specifically to shine more light on the work of women in the space. But I hope everybody gets value from it. It's not just that only women should look at those live streams. I hope that's not what people interpret it as. Which would be strange to me if that's the case, but it might be the case. So do join that live stream series. We had an amazing live stream last week with Divya, whom I shared some content from earlier in this live stream. And the next week we have Hannah. Hannah is from, where is she working at? I forgot where she's working at. I did several different live streams with her already, and she's going to share her learnings getting started with Kubernetes, coming from an engineering background and then becoming a developer advocate. So some interesting content there as well. So do join next week for that if you want to. Yeah, if you want to. No, please join. It would be fun. And I'm sure there's lots of exciting content. Also, do let me know if there's any specific content you want to see covered in that live stream series. And I'm going to make sure I'm going to find somebody who can speak on that content. Awesome. Thank you so much for listening. Awesome. Yeah, share it with you can always share content with women that you find in the space on Twitter, for example. Like I have lots of people who share specific initiatives with me and ask me, "Hey Anais, could you please tweet about it to reach more people? Could you please reach out to people within your community?" And that's one way to get more diverse views on a content piece or something. There's really nothing wrong with reaching out to people and be like, "Hey, we have this initiative. Do you want to get involved? Could you I have a hair in my eye? Oh God, it doesn't go away. Anyway, yeah. So there's really nothing wrong with reaching out to people. I hope this helps. I hope this was insightful. This little live stream series on tech influencers and women in the cloud native, or like women focused events and women focused initiatives. Thank you so much for joining. I hope you join us next week for the live stream as part of this series, She Can Cloud Native. Hope to see you there. Have an amazing day and have an amazing rest of your week. Until then, bye bye everybody. Thank you for joining.